You know that feeling when you finally think you're free, when you've worked years of your life saving every penny, sacrificing nights out, skipping vacations, just so you can finally buy a place to call your own. A place that's supposed to be yours, where no one gets to tell you how to live, how to decorate, what to do with your space. Yeah, that was me. I had just bought my very first home. Nothing fancy, nothing you'd see on the cover of a magazine. Just a modest two-bedroom with a small front yard, an old porch swing, and white siding that had definitely seen better days. But to me, it was heaven. After years of renting crappy apartments with landlords who charged me for every little thing, I was finally free. Or so I thought. Because little did I know, the so-called freedom of owning my first home was about to come crashing down the second I met the people who thought they owned the entire street. I still remember the first time they came knocking. It was a Saturday morning. I was still unpacking boxes, running on coffee and leftover pizza, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to see 3 people standing there with clipboards, like some kind of bureaucratic army. In the middle was a woman in her 60s, silver hair and a perfect helmet, lips pursed like she'd swallowed a lemon. She introduced herself as Margaret. On her left was a man named Bob, mid-50s, permanent frown lines etched into his face, looking like someone who complained about teenagers existing. And on her right, a woman around 40 with the kind of sharp haircut that screamed, "Manager who sends passive-aggressive emails." Her name, I kid you not, was Karen. Margaret gave me a smile that was more teeth than warmth. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, her tone syrupy but cold underneath. "We just wanted to stop by and go over a few standards we like to maintain around here." I blinked. Standards? I hadn't signed up for a homeowners association. When I was buying the place, I'd specifically checked for that. No official HOA. Freedom, right? Wrong. Margaret continued. "We like to keep the neighborhood cohesive. Neutral colors only. White, cream, light gray. Nothing flashy, nothing distracting. You understand?" I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I was fuming. I had literally just moved in and these people were already telling me what I could or couldn't do with my own property. I bit my tongue that day, telling myself they were just overzealous. Maybe they'd leave me alone. Spoiler, they did not. A week later, I was chatting with another neighbor, a nice older man who actually minded his own business, and mentioned that I was planning to repaint the house. I wanted to give it some life, some personality. Well, word must have traveled fast because not 2 days later, Margaret was back on my porch, hands on her hips. "I heard you're planning on painting," she said, her voice sharp. "I just hope you'll stick to something respectable. Beige, perhaps. White would be lovely." That was the moment the seed of revenge planted itself in my brain. Who was she to dictate what I did with my house? I hadn't signed a single paper obligating me to follow their imaginary rule book. But still, I kept my composure. I smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." What I didn't say out loud was, "Oh, I'll handle it, all right. You won't know what hit you." Over the next couple of weeks, their little comments kept piling on. Bob yelled across the street one day, "Don't ruin property values," like he was some kind of sheriff. Karen, with her smug little smirk, said, "We're just trying to protect the neighborhood aesthetic." I even overheard Margaret whispering to another neighbor, "I just pray she doesn't make it look tacky." Every remark was like gasoline on a fire. I thought about all the times in my life people had tried to box me in, to tell me who I should be, how I should act. Teachers who told me I was too loud. Bosses who told me to tone it down. Ex-friends who said I should be more like everyone else. And now, here I was, a grown adult with a mortgage, and these people were still trying to control me. I wasn't going to let it slide. This was bigger than paint. This was about reclaiming the space that was mine and making a statement they would never forget. So I hatched my plan. One Saturday, I walked into the paint store like a woman on a mission. The clerk, a guy in his 20s with paint stains on his jeans, asked if I needed help. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, What's the brightest, most obnoxious color you sell? I want the kind of shade you can see from space." He grinned, clearly enjoying the request, and disappeared into the back. When he came out, he was holding a sample swatch that practically glowed in the fluorescent lights. Neon pink. Not soft pink, not pastel, but full-blown, highlighter, eye-searing pink. It was glorious. I said, "Perfect, I'll take 5 gallons." The following weekend, I rented a sprayer and got to work. The first pass of that paint over my old white siding felt like pure catharsis. With each streak of neon pink, I could feel my frustration melting into satisfaction. Neighbors slowed down as they drove by, some gaping, some laughing. Kids on bikes circled around, pointing and giggling. I didn't even care, because the real show was just about to start. By the time I was halfway done, Margaret came storming across the street like a general leading her troops. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her face turning red. I paused, lowered my sprayer, and gave her the sweetest smile I could muster. "Painting," I said simply. "Isn't it obvious?" "You can't do this. This is outrageous," she yelled, flapping her hands. "You're ruining the neighborhood." Karen appeared behind her, gasping like I'd committed a crime, and Bob shouted something about property values plummeting. I just shrugged. Unless you can show me a law against pink paint, I'm pretty sure I can do whatever I want. And then I turned my back and kept spraying. By the end of that weekend, my house looked like a giant piece of cotton candy, the kind of shade you couldn't ignore even if you tried. At night, under the streetlights, it practically glowed. It was magnificent. The fallout was everything I hoped for and more. Margaret called the city, demanding they force me to repaint. The city official politely told her there was no ordinance against my choice. She tried to get other neighbors to sign a petition. Only 3 people did: herself, Bob, and Karen. Everyone else? They thought it was hilarious. Some of them even told me privately that they loved it, that it brought some fun to the otherwise boring row of beige houses. Over time, my neon pink house became a landmark. Delivery drivers used it for directions. Turn left at the bright pink house. Kids called it the Bubblegum Castle. I even saw it featured on the city's tourism Instagram page as one of the quirky local sites. Hundreds of people liked the photo. My house was internet famous. And Margaret? She looked like she was aging 10 years a day. I'd catch her standing on her driveway, glaring at my house like it had personally offended her existence. Karen tried to avoid making eye contact with me, and Bob muttered under his breath whenever I walked by. Meanwhile, I sipped iced tea on my neon pink porch, basking in the glow of my petty, perfect revenge. The best part came one evening as the sun set. The rays hit my neon siding and made it shine even brighter, almost blinding. I watched from my porch as Margaret stood frozen in her yard, hand on her forehead like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She looked utterly defeated, like all her power had evaporated. And in that moment, I knew I had won. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be cruel or destructive. Sometimes it's just about standing your ground and refusing to let people control you. My house wasn't just neon pink. It was a monument to freedom, to individuality, to not giving in to bullies who think they can run your life. They wanted beige conformity. I gave them neon chaos, and honestly, I've never been prouder. So if you're ever tempted to cave to people who try to box you in, remember my story. Remember the neon pink house that drove an entire fake HOA crazy. And maybe, just maybe, pick the brightest color you can find and paint your world exactly how you want it. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living unapologetically, right where everyone can see it.